So this little podcast thing is about something really very serious. So I'm going to try to keep it short and not funny because it matters a lot. I'm not a scientist, but I do have a master's in history, U.S. history, also in philosophy, and then another in European history. So that is to say, I know quite a bit about fucking everything. So, as far as COVID goes, I don't know a lot about the details, but I do know that it's real. I also know that it's not a conspiracy. I also know personally virologists who are working on, or who were working on cures for vaccines for the virus. I know these people because I'm a lifelong academic, and as an academic you get to know a lot of other academics. And not all academics, but most academics are very smart. So even if it's not an area where you are the expert, you are still generally able to follow the conversation. So that said, what I know is that COVID is real. The vaccines that are being produced and released, I don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad. I do know that there are multiple versions of it. I also know there are multiple strains of COVID. So it's a complicated situation. Now, I'm not going to tell you if you should or shouldn't get a shot, but you should get a shot because it's not government mind control. It's not any of those stupid conspiracy theories that Alex Jones spent years literally killing people because of his evil rhetoric. Now, the biggest group who doesn't, that I've seen, who doesn't believe in the vaccines or vaccination are Black Americans. And there's a long history of that, and their concerns are very well founded. The most common example that comes up is the Tuskegee experiments. If you don't know about that, it was funded by the U.S. Public Health Service, and it took place in Macon County, Alabama. So it was funded by the United States Public Health Service. It was a government-funded program where they gave Black Americans syphilis in an attempt to cure the disease. This started in 1932. Now, what most people don't know is that this is not something that was only happening in America. Doctors all over the world were running very unethical experiments on unknown subjects. One of the most famous examples are Nazi doctors. Because of Nazi doctors, many diseases which used to exist no longer exist. Because of the Tuskegee experiments, syphilis has been largely eradicated. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that anything about that is okay, but what it was an attempt to solve problems for future generations. Again, it's not okay. But, that said, it wasn't an attempt to eradicate all Black people. At the time, they were just considered lesser, so why not test on them? Now, I'm not saying that as a defense, like, why not? Yeah, they should have. I'm saying it as that was their line of thinking at the time. This comes from a history of phrenology, wherein scientists posited that the black man was a lesser being, closer to an ape than to a person. So they didn't see, in their minds, what they were doing was testing on animals, which is also unethical. So I'm not defending these studies, I'm just explaining them. Now, what they did was wrong. Some of those people are still alive. The government certainly owes them. But what it doesn't mean is that black people should not distrust medicine. The biological differences between white and black and Asian, again, in the West we say Caucanoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid, is minimal. There are some differences. Some medications work better for black people or for Asians than for white people, and vice versa. But most medicines work just as well for all of those groups because our biological differences are very minimal. Now, again, don't take my word for it because I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you the history. But I'm also telling you that doctors, by and large, are not racist. They're not trying to exterminate. A lot of this was done with good intention, but with bad science, which is why science is... There's a difference between science and religion for a reason. Scientists can be wrong. Scientists in general they're more interested in theory than they are in people. But that doesn't mean that they're not trying to help people. So my point here is this. Yes, there is a bad history of treatment of blacks in medicine in the U.S., but the most of it stems from phrenology, which has been debunked for over a century, and the other example is the syphilis study, which is wrong, but is only one example. So there is no evidence of a widespread conspiracy to eradicate the blacks. The point being, talk to black leaders about it. Don't listen to... If you're black, you're not going to take my word for it, and that's fine. But talk to the black leaders. Talk to the Nation of Islam. I've been speaking to Sadat X, who's a member of the Nation, the 5% Nation. I've been speaking to a few other members of that community, explaining things that they sort of doubted because they only see it from their perspective, mostly in the most segregated city in the country, New York. Whereas I grew up in a very integrated study in a ghetto. So if they're trying to kill poor people, I'd be very high on that list. So it's not a conspiracy. Now that said, as far as I know, there are still some possible issues with the vaccines. So talk to the experts before you take it, but don't be paranoid about conspiracy theories that are absolute nonsense. That's really all I have to say about this.